Well, there you go, Bill.
All right. I have a record button too, so I could have done that, I think. I'm almost trained, right?
Highly technical. We don't know.
All right, so let me share my screen here. And let's see. So you all seeing that?
Yep.
Great. So again, today we're going to be talking about high impact generosity and how we start to investigate nonprofits. And so one of the things I want to say up front is that this is a model, or you call it a rubric for how we're looking at things. And so sometimes we're gonna look at some organizations that you might think are going to score great, and they don't. Doesn't mean they're a bad organization, right? It's just this is the way we're teaching this to help people understand how nonprofits or ministries are using the dollars that are entrusted to them. So keep an open mind. We will go pretty fast, but it's actually, we try to break it down and make it as simple as we can. I will try, if you guys have questions or if you something doesn't make sense, honestly, just holler, right? That's what we're here for. We want to make this make as much sense as possible for you guys. I will, so we did a little bit of an introduction. So thank you. So Dan actually talked about the Giving University Facebook page. Please go ahead and like that, and you'll get information on the trips that are coming up. We talked a little bit about the trips last week. We'll be talking more about that in the company. You guys saw it on the video if you're doing the makeup. But again, this is a great place to get information about what's going on at Giving University and what's the latest and greatest. Mentioned this Poverty Inc. documentary. So again, we want you to watch this by week 4. There is a link in the student section of the Giving University webpage, givinguniversity.org, under the student link under important links. It's really, we want you to watch that by week 4. So we're in week 2 now. So 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to spend some time talking about that. And by the way, we'll also talk a little bit more about this in a second, but each of you should have a copy of the GU handout, the Giving University handout. There is a set of questions in there about the Poverty Inc. video that we'll want you to answer. They're just 3 or 4 pretty basic kinds of questions. This thing will really radically change the way you look at giving. And I like to say, maybe as kind of a lead in or a tip off to it, it's the epitome of good intentions gone bad, right? So people trying to do the right thing, but it doesn't always work out that way. So again, take some time. It's a little bit more than an hour. So set some time aside to do that. So by way of review, last week we talked about what are things that you are passionate about? What are people groups that you're passionate about? Is it kids? Is it the homeless? Is it people that are addicted? Whatever the case might be. And so some of the homework that we talked about was, which people are you most passionate about? And so we'll talk about this in just a second, but I want to really emphasize, we really feel like it's important for you to find a passion so that, it's kind of an unnatural desire to be involved and to help, right? And so, again, if you're passionate, you become more involved. So, as we look at this class, we're talking about generosity, we're talking about giving. And so basically there's more to life, that we believe there's more to life than just eating, sleeping, working, kind of hit the reset button and do it again and again. And so I'm going to ask you guys if you have some examples of things that you're passionate about, or maybe you've thought about over this last week. If you don't find a passion yet, as you start looking at things, you'll develop it. And I will tell you, it may not be the first thing you dive into. You may see something and you may think, oh, this is really cool. And then you kind of get into it and you're like, oh, I'm just not, yeah, this is important work, but it's just not really really get me excited about it. And so that's okay. Last week I described a little bit how our passion here in our family has changed a little bit over the years, and that's okay. You say it's different seasons, different times, and you get passionate about different things. The most important thing out of all of this is think about being generous and think about how we can make the world a better place, make it a little bit better than we found it. So who thought of what you guys were thinking about passion or thinking about areas that you were interested in? Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? Areas maybe you focused in or volunteered in before, or what gets you going and why? Dun, 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 dun. Go ahead, Jan.
I can share. So I mentioned it on the application. I volunteered with Royal Family Kids. That's an organization that you guys work with. And I had never volunteered with foster kids actually, until that opportunity. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I just didn't think that I had a heart for kids, honestly. I had never volunteered with kids, but I ended up volunteering in their camp. I ended up being one of the mentors for their, they have like a mentorship club that they do after they come back from camp. And I loved it. I'm still in touch with my camper from 2 years ago. So it's something that I didn't think I had the passion for, but I gave it a shot and I really, really love it.
That's great. Love that. Who else?
This is Katie. I really have a passion for kids in general, but I also have a passion for kids and adults that have special needs. And I've also spent two different families, time living with families whose spouse have been deployed with the U.S. military. And so the more I'm getting into that and seeing the ways that they need support, I really have a heart for veterans and their families as well.
Great. Thank you. Let's see.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gene?
So where I work, I started off as a volunteer. It's a youth center, and it's I live in a small town, and there's not a whole lot of things to do. So it's in the center of our city, and like in the bad neighborhood. So there's a lot of kids that don't have the means to be able to afford the things that we provide. Like we have guitar lessons and art classes and tutoring and computer classes and all these things that are for free. And to see how much the parents are so appreciative, and the kids, how grateful they are when they come. It just made me really have a heart for the community, not just for the center, but just for the community, and how much hunger there is, especially with homes that don't have, a mom and dad, or single parent homes and stuff like that. They really make an impact for our community, and I love it.
That's great. And it's local. We're going to be talking about local stuff here in just a little bit. So I think we have a new person, although we can't see Gina's face yet. Gina, can you hear us?
Oh, yes. Let me try to figure out how to turn on my camera. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, we definitely love you to be on video if you can. While you're doing that, if you maybe take a second and introduce yourself to everybody.
No problem. My name is Gina Roth, and I live in Colorado. One of my coworkers went through Giving University earlier this year, and I saw her post on social media, and that really piqued my interest in it. I actually work for a charity. I work for Schwab Charitable. So I'm very familiar with 990 forms, and we're a donor advised fund. So my main job is just sending donation checks to 501c3 charities.
Okay.
So I'm very passionate about volunteering, giving of my time, So this course just really aligns with my values and my occupation. So I just thought it would be really interesting and a great opportunity to take this course.
Great. Well, we're glad you're here. And thanks for taking the time. Hopefully you'll find it useful. So by the way, since you do this all the time, we're going to be talking a lot about the 990 today and how we score. So please, please be nice to your instructor because he's still learning this stuff. But we're really excited to have you here and get your perspective on the class. And again, for everybody, I do want to mention, and I always mention this, as you see things that you think we can do better or need to emphasize more, just let us know, right? We make it a little bit better each time we do it. And so we really appreciate everybody's certainly taking the time, over a, 7-8 week period. And we know it's a commitment. So again, thank you all for being here. Before we dive into this, evaluating some nonprofits, anybody else have anything they want to share in terms of their passion? Okay. All right. Well, so, I've told you guys before that sometimes we're going to be going really, really fast. So we're going to jump into some nonprofit terminology and some things that are going to be important as we go through the class. And so again, a lot of data here. If something doesn't make sense, kind of raise your hand, let me know, and we'll try and go back over to make sure we're being clear on how we're defining this stuff. So, I'm certainly, as I kind of kidded around with, I'm not an expert on nonprofits. I have sat on a nonprofit board and been the chairman of a board. So I've seen these things before and pretty conversant with it. But what we want to do is right now is give you a little bit of a foundation for how we're going to do research into these nonprofits. And ultimately, we'll talk a little bit more later on about the research project. But as most of you know, we're going to do a research project throughout the time here together. And once that's approved, you'll actually have the ability to take a check to a local nonprofit that you've researched for $1,000. So it's really pretty cool. Again, Giving University definitely puts its money where its mouth is. So let's start off with some terminology. So 501c3 is a part of the U.S. code, the tax code. And what it really does is a government regulation that defines nonprofit status. So, just like all of us have to do a tax return every year, a 1040 or a 1040 EZ or whatever the case might be, nonprofits, most nonprofits, not all, have to file what's called an IRS Form 990. And it's the tax return for a nonprofit. One of the things about a 990 is it has to be available, it's made available publicly for people to look at. Now, there's a couple of different forms, if you will, of the 990. And so if you think about it related to how we do our own taxes, so it's like the 1040 and then a 1040 EZ. Well, it's kind of the same kind of concept. There's the 990 form itself, and that's for organizations that have gross receipts, the money they bring in, or revenue of more than $200,000 and or total assets of more than $500,000. So that's that's important because when we're doing the research project, we're going to want you to pick an organization that has to do the full 990. Part of this is being able to read these things and understand how nonprofits are using their money. So if an organization is less than $200,000, they don't have to file the full 990. They just have to do either the 990 EZ, or if they're real small, less than $50,000, they can do the postcard 990. And again, doesn't mean that these aren't great organizations doing great things. Again, we just, for the purposes of getting through the course material and understanding it, we're going to ask you to find an organization that has to do a real 990. And we'll talk a little bit later about what you need to do or how we can help you do the research on different organizations. Any questions on that so far? So the other term that we're going to use is, as you'll hear, is NGO, non-government or non-governmental organization. It's basically just the international term for a nonprofit. So for example, when you watch the Poverty Inc. video, they'll talk about NGOs, right? And so NGOs are great, but again, for the research project, we're going to ask you to pick something local. And when we say local, we mean that you can, in a non-COVID world, you can walk in and hand them this check and tell them about Giving University and what a great, or what a great experience it was to learn about their organization, and you have the ability to bring that check benefit to them. So again, GU, pick one, somebody between 200,000 and probably 20 million. I mean, if it's a little bigger than that, that's actually okay. But if it gets too gigantic, it's kind of really, the 990s can be 50, 80, 90 pages. And we really don't want you to have to go through all of that. The other thing is, I will, and I'll probably mention this again and again, as you start going through this, some organizations are going to score really well, some aren't. And we want to hear about the no's too. What did you learn? Why was that? And we'll talk about some strategies around, again, if it's a no based on the way we score it, again, it doesn't mean it's a bad organization, but it might open up an opportunity for you to go learn more about it. Most quality nonprofits, ministries, whatever, they want to talk about how they run their ministry. They want you to see that they're being good stewards of what's been put in front of them. All right, so let's talk also about some misconceptions. Can a nonprofit make money? What do you guys think?
Yes.
Absolutely. They sure can. They can charge for stuff. And effectively, if they spend less than they actually bring in, they are making money. Can a nonprofit pay employees?
Yes, they can.
Yes, absolutely. So what makes it a nonprofit? Anybody have any ideas around that?
Probably the objective is not to solely make money.
That's well said, Charles. I think the money it spends must be in line with its nonprofit purposes. And we'll talk about their purpose and where you find that and how you can research it. So it really, if you think about it, a for-profit company, when it makes a profit, it can do certain things. It can reinvest in its business. It can actually distribute it. It can buy back stock. It can do all of those things. A nonprofit, can't do that. It can't distribute, I'm going to say excess revenue or additional revenue beyond its expenses. So they must use their money to further their express purposes or give it away to another nonprofit. We'll talk about that a little bit, but they can't give it to stockholders, which again is a big key difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit organization. And then like one last point, for-profit organizations can't receive tax deductible gifts. So as many of you know, if you give to a charity or a nonprofit or a ministry, at the end of the year, you get something that allows you to take some of that off of your taxes. So why do we have nonprofits in the US? A lot of other countries, by the way, don't have them. And let me also state, having led a trip internationally, when you try and do the research on international NGOs or nonprofits or ministries, the documentation is way different than it is here in North America. And so again, we'll be talking about that as we get further into class, and we're talking about trips and how do you actually evaluate those organizations. So why do we have nonprofits? So the tax code is used by our government to encourage and discourage behavior. So the government likes it when families can have houses, so there's a deduction for mortgage interest. So that encourages home ownership. But they don't allow a deduction for interest on credit cards because they don't want to incent too much spending on credit. So why for charitable contributions? To encourage giving. And so if you think about our discussion last week and the difference between generosity and giving, if we are giving in order to get a tax break, that doesn't necessarily mean we're being generous, it just means we're giving. So, and I think the other thing is, we talk about nonprofits, they shouldn't be spending things outside of their stated purpose. And so it gives you some level of confidence that your donation won't be wasted. Now, there's no guarantee that all nonprofits are fully above board and use their money wisely, because people are involved in that, right? And in the next couple of weeks or next week, we're going to watch a pretty terrible video about a fraudulent nonprofit. So they're out there. And I think, again, part of, if, you know, thinking back to Steve Gray's video, having an understanding of how an organization is using its money, is it using it wisely? And how do we maximize the impact of the dollars that we put into an organization? That's, again, a big part of what this whole class is about. Some more nonprofit stats. How many tax exempt organizations are there in the US? Anybody care to take a guess? So I almost feel like we need to check this number, but it's at least 1.6 million, right? So what's the takeaway from that? You can't give to all of them. And so that's why, again, we come back to this discussion about passion. Where are you putting your time and your talent and your money in an organization to make the world a better place? So as we do the research and we learn about well-run nonprofits, it gives us the ability to focus our efforts and maximize the impact of the resources that we provide or that we give to a nonprofit. So as we look at, you know, you're going to hear a lot of talk about the 990. Again, you can see any 990 that is published. And so we actually have, I have a website. Again, we talked about the small ones, don't want to do too small organization. There's an organization called GuideStar. And this, you'll get copies of the slides after class tonight, or we'll probably get them tomorrow. But again, you'll have the ability to log into GuideStar. We'll do this a little bit later and look at a couple of organizations and how to find the 990s and what do they really look like. By the way, they rate them, which is good. The other thing is the login only works for one person. So for example, when I go to log in later and show it to you guys, don't everybody go log in because it'll kick me off, right? So you may find it's like, oh, wait a minute, somebody else must be on there, because it's there's going to be contention. You know, there's two classes going right now, and so don't get frustrated by it. It's still a great way to do research. So at any rate, and I want to say that this 990 gives us, and the scale that we're going to show you here in just a second, gives us the ability to have an objective view of how a nonprofit's doing. That's just one piece of this, and that's just one piece of the research project that we'll talk about here in a bit as well. So, you know, your experiences with a particular nonprofit, your passion, your energy, kind of your heart, what you feel about nonprofits, that's going to also impact certainly how you approach the research project. And we want that. Again, we want to see the passion. We want to understand how you want to be involved. You know, you can use the nonprofits websites. You don't just have to use GuideStar. You can call people. We've had organizations that looked like, I'm not getting all the information I wanted from the 990. So again, call the executive director, call their development person or whoever, in order to find out what's really going on and how you can be a part of it, or what they're really going on, what is really going on there. And then again, we've had people here already talk about personal experiences with a nonprofit. So if you have personal experience with a nonprofit, you know they're doing good work. That's a great thing to be able to, I'll say, illustrate or amplify for the board. You know, when we talk about doing this research project, ultimately the GU board is going to evaluate it, and I will tell you, they want to say yes. They want you guys to be successful in this project, and they want to help people be successful in their ministry. So, you know, again, change the world, make it a better place, maximize the impact of the dollars or the resources that are put into a nonprofit. Any questions? All right. So we're going to define some terms on the 990. And I will show you our analysis form here in just a second. So we might have to flip back and forth a little bit so you see how it all fits together. But so we'll talk about defining some terms on the 990. So one, revenue. So yes, even in a nonprofit, we call it revenue. So that's dollars coming in. And that can come in a number of different ways, right? And so we'll talk about the different ways that it comes in and what's important around that. We're going to talk about one thing called program service revenue. So if you think about how do nonprofits generate their income, generate their revenue? The first one is you all, I mean, probably can think of it as donations, right? So they get donations. There's another way that nonprofits can generate revenue or income. They can charge for stuff effectively. And so we're going to look at, and we call that program service revenue. Okay, so whether they're providing a service, Goodwill Industries is one that everybody likes to, we all like to rail on it because it's gigantic and it really looks a lot like a for-profit business. They generate most of their income by selling stuff in their stores, right? And so that would be program service revenue. So one of the things that we're going to look at is how much program service revenue or what proportion of the organization's revenue is program service revenue as opposed to coming from donations. One of the other things we're going to look at is highly compensated individuals. And so again, it's fine for people in nonprofits to make a great living. But one of the things we're going to want to look at is how many people in the organization are what we would consider highly compensated. And so for the purposes of this class, we're going to consider people that make over $170,000 highly compensated. So again, depending on the size of the organization, you've got to put some time and attention into thinking about it. I actually don't have this one teed up, but one of the first classes I did, we teed up one that was, they had two highly compensated individuals. They were husband and wife, and their total compensation was like 90+% of the revenue of the organization. So again, it's just, they might be doing some great work, but again, from the perspective of, if I give them $10, how much that's going to make it out to people that really need help, right? It's just not there. So, and again, we always use the bad examples to really, clarify that and make it make sense for you guys. But again, you've got to really look at it from the perspective of, what's the size of the organization, what are they accomplishing, and so on and so forth. So we'll look at the number of people that are highly compensated. We're also gonna look at grants. Grants are, typically government funded grants or from private nonprofits, right? I guess, Gina could talk to that a little bit, right? And so the grants are great. And we know a lot of organizations definitely rely on them. One of the things that we are looking at in our evaluation is how much of their revenue comes from grants. Are they highly dependent on it? Because if they are, grant funding can be somewhat capricious. It could go away. And if you lose your grant, does that mean the organization can't continue to survive and perform its mission? So again, from a risk perspective, if you're putting time and money and your attention into that, and a big grant goes away, how would that impact the organization? So we'll talk again about what some of the thresholds are for this stuff. So typically we're looking for less than 60% of their total revenue to come from grants. Oh, I'm going to add one here after grants before overhead. We're actually going to talk also about functional expenses. So there are organizations that are typically considered pass-throughs. I think maybe Gina, your organization is really providing funding for other organizations as its primary thing. The United Way is another one that does this, right? So they're capturing, donations, and then they're applying them out to requisite organizations. Those are great organizations. For the purposes of Giving University, we wouldn't typically expect to see a high percentage of what we'll call pass-throughs or grants, because effectively there's an overhead or a tax for that organization. So if I give $100 to United Way, maybe only 85 of it gets out to the field. Whereas if I go to, Amazon Outreach, 100% of my money goes right to the organization. So at any rate, so that we're gonna focus on, we're gonna look at functional expenses. We're also gonna look at overhead and management. What percentage of expenses are management and overhead? Again, we don't want to see a real high percentage there. Kind of world-class is less than 10%. And then finally, how much money is spent on fundraising? And so again, we've seen organizations that spend an inordinate amount of money on fundraising. Again, the impact of that is that if you give them $100 and 25% of their expenses are going to fundraising, it takes a huge cut out of that money and the ability for it to make an impact in people. So any comments or questions on that? Okay. So this is the GU 990 analysis form. And so, we defined the terms before, but now let me just walk through kind of what looks good. And then, you can see by the scoring, what might not look quite as good. So program service revenue, we look at how much of the total revenue comes from selling things, charging for stuff, providing services. So again, if it's less than 60%, you would score 3 points or 0.6, right? And we're going to go look at a real 990 in just a second. So if you guys have a copy of this in front of you while we go through that 990, it'll make sense as to where you see the numbers, kind of come from and flow to. Pages 7 and 8 on the 990 show the highest paid salaries people. It could actually be a little bit further back in the document. Hopefully I'll pick a good one tonight. But again, if you have zero people making over 170, you would score 3 points, and so on and so forth. So if you had 3 or more, you only get 1 point there. And I'm going to talk in a second about what we're going to consider a good score, again, for the purposes of this evaluation and the research project. Statement of revenue, again, we're going to figure out exactly how much money is coming from grants. We don't want to see too high a reliance on that. So again, if it's over 80%, you only get 1 point. If it's less than 0.6, you get 3 points. Functional expenses, again, how much shows how much of their expenses giving grants to other U.S. organizations, and a sliding scale there. And then, the last two, management and overhead and fundraising. Again, wanting to see something, the highest score is at less than 10%. And so when you add all these up, there's a total possible score of 18. All right. So typically, we're going to want to see 16 or better for funding for your research project. Now, again, I've put in grant requests for organizations that are not that high, and because there's a story behind it. But for the purposes of our class, we're really going to look for, 15, you're probably going to have to answer a lot of questions. 16, 17, you're probably good. 18, you're definitely good, right? So it's all and how, I will say part of it is how you present the organization, why you're passionate about it. Certainly, if you've been involved with it in the past, that's gonna impact how the board views that. Any questions? I promise you, this makes sense once you do a couple of them, right? The first time you do it, you're gonna be like, wait a minute, where is line 12? Where is line 9? So why don't we go to the GuideStar website. I just happen to have it here somewhere. Maybe not. All right. Bear with me a sec. All right, I have to come out of slideshow. And now I can come here. I think I can come here. All right, bear with me, folks. My computer is not helping me right now.
There you go, Bill.
Yeah. It's
So-
operator error.
So while we're dealing with the operator, is there any questions on anything so far?
I have a question.
Sure.
So for the research project, like we're going to be looking for a local organization, but also would it have to be something that you guys have not worked with before?
No, most of the time, if it's a duplicate, it's not a big deal. If we've done 50 grants to somebody, it might be a big deal. Where are you located again?
Riverside, California.
Okay. There's a chance we may get a dupe or a 3, but I think you'll be just fine if you find a good one.
Okay, thank you.
And a lot of times, sometimes people will do one to do the exercise for the class. And if something's not quite right, if you do the exercise for the class well, then you pass that part. Sometimes people will do a different one. They maybe change their mind or something later on. But anyway, to get through the class, you just have to do one that, that you do a good presentation. You get to talk a little bit about them once you
Yeah.
get one put together. It looks like
All
Bill
right, so
be there.
this is always dangerous when I do this live, right? But does anybody have an organization they think they might want to look at? I can pick one, but I was, if you guys are. All right. So Mended Hearts, I'm going to choose this one here in Dallas. I think they have a 501. That's Baltimore, right? So this one is I'll say near and dear. I think this is the right one. No. All right, I'm going to cheat. Look, I found a 990. Mended Hearts is an organization that supports heart patients. Our grandson was born with half a heart, and so this is an organization that helped his mom and dad quite a bit when they found out about that. So as you can see, it's open to inspection, public inspection, and so on the first page it tells us right here what they do. They say they support heart disease patients, right? And so if you're looking at, I'm sorry, this is how I do multimedia, right? if you're looking at the 990 analysis form, the first thing that we're going to want to do is understand the level of program service revenue. So here you see on line 9, there's program service revenue. We'll do it for the current year. So it's $43,813. And we're going to divide that by the total revenue, which is 1.9 million. And so that's, I'm going to say, way less than, certainly way less than 10%, right? So we know that it's less than 60%. So they would score, 3 points there. All right. And so now we're just going to follow this down. It's, okay, so now it says, let's go to pages 7 and 8 and see if there's any highly paid employees. Page 5. Sorry, I don't want to give anybody vertigo by scrolling here. 7. Here we go. So pages 7 and 8 show the highest paid individuals. They will typically also tell you that people that are on the board of directors and the amount of time that they spend. So that's what you see here, are board people and officers of the nonprofit, and they have a lot of them. And so here we see typically executive director is a name that you will, or the title you'll see for kind of the COO or the CEO of a nonprofit. And so here we see that, Michelle Milam is the executive director and her reportable compensation was 101,000. So they have 0 people that are making over 170. And so again, they would score the full 3 points there. So far, so good. So now this next one's going to get a little bit more difficult because I'm going to have to jump around a little bit. I can show you the whole page, but it would get so small, it's hard to really tell. So, all right. So I don't know why that's showing up as blacked out, but what we're going to look at is line 1E, government grants. So that's 1E. They get actually no government grants. So again, this one is going to score super very well. So it's way less than 60%. So you would divide 0 by this line down here, 1H. So that's 0. And again, they get 3 points there. Functional expenses. We're now going to go down to the next page, page 10. And so again, just following through the rubric, we're going to look to line 1B, which is 0, and we're going to divide it by 25B, all the way down at the bottom, again, 1.8. So again, less than, so it's 0, so it's less than 0.6, so they get 3 points there. And then the last 2 are also here looking at down here on line 25. So again, we can't see the column headings, but you've got A, B, C, and D. So now we're going to divide C by A. Actually, I can do the math on this one, but it's just less than 10%, right? So 199,597 divided by about 2 million. Again, that comes out to just a little bit less than 10%. So again, less than 10% scores 3 points. And then lastly, column D, 72,000 divided by 2 million. Again, it's less than 10%. So it scores 3 points. So again, this organization on the rubric scores really, really well. So now let me go back to this. Now, so I'm one of the things that you can do within GuideStar is you can pick different areas like you could pick California, you could pick any state, you can pick the organization. And again, you can pick you can filter by revenue. So again, see if you wanted to filter, say nothing bigger than 20 million, 21 million there, it would allow you to now dive right in, right? And so let's, you can also see that GuideStar is ranking things based on their rubric as in terms of what looks good. So again, if we were just to click into Children's here in Omaha, Nebraska, this foundation, we come down here. And so their mission, it states their mission, and this typically comes right off the 990. And then you see down here in the lower right, we can look at their Form 990. And you can download with these guys pretty much everything. So a couple of things. 990s are not always the most current tax, or they're not always the current year or most current year. So for example, when I was at Amazon Outreach, our tax year was a little bit different from the calendar year. So, you know, right now, I think their latest one is like 2019, even though we're kind of towards the end of 2021. So don't let that fool you. If the last one you saw was 2012, that would kind of be a red flag, right? They're like, that they're not filing it. So again, here it is. And let me try and make this a little bigger. So this is the actual 990. By the way, when you choose your organization, you're going to want to download this and send an electronic copy into Beth and I with your packet when everything's ready to go. So again, it's literally as easy as all that. So let's come back out of here. There's a tremendous amount of, I'll say, capability to search here. You know, if you know the name of the organization, you can just put it in. Again, you can search by, again, size, state, city, all kinds of different things. If you want to, you know, so here's Operation Safe House in Riverside, of all places, right? So there you go. That's one that we looked at, I think, last session when we did this. So again, tremendous amount of capability here. I would say, as you identify an organization and you want to do this next week, we can do it as a team, and we can kind of walk through and score it together to see if it kind of meets the requirements of what we're looking for. Again, from a purely objective standpoint. Any questions? And again, you'll get on a slide, there's a login so that you can get into GuideStar and start looking around. If you have one in mind, which a couple of you probably do, just type the name in there. And then sometimes you'll see, you know, organizations that have, so I wouldn't suggest necessarily doing Ronald McDonald House, right? Because it's part of a national organization as opposed to something really local. But you would see, if we typed in Ronald McDonald, you see, you know, 100 of them pop up, right? Every major city that has one kind of thing. So questions, comments? All right. So what happens if you get a low score? You know, again, a low score doesn't mean the organization is bad. Many organizations that they do great work, but they candidly might not be as well run as they could be, and that's okay. You know, I think I would tell you one of the things that, and because I've seen this happen, and I might have been a part of this myself at one point in my life, but you know, there are a lot of great nonprofits out there, and so I've seen people walk into nonprofits and say, wow, what we could be doing all this so much differently and so much better and all that stuff. That's not the purpose of this whole discussion and this whole process, right? You know, our job is to find and dig into something, get passionate about something, and make a difference. A lot of times organizations are doing some great things, but it might not completely align with what you want to do. I I think it's important to remember we need to align with what the organization is trying to accomplish, as opposed to trying to bend the organization to your will or what you want. I've worked in a number of environments where I'll just say people that are very successful in life feel like they want to get their way and they want to do things a certain way. It's not the right approach for a nonprofit. If they're not doing something the way you think they should, you can certainly ask about it and make suggestions, but it's really important to be able to not spin your wheels on what they should be doing. Instead, spin your wheels on what can I do to make the world a better place and where do I have passion. Sometimes you'll see a low score. It means they just don't rely on donations. Nothing wrong with that. We talked about the whole, if you're getting grants, there's a risk to it. But again, organizations have done it for years and years and years, and it can be a healthy part of their funding strategy. And lastly, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. If your organization scores low and you're really passionate about it, or the organization, they're doing great stuff, and they'd want a chance to explain, call them and ask them, right? Again, the executive directors want to talk about their organizations, and it's really, it may not necessarily be always comfortable, but you can call them and say, hey, look, I'm taking this class. It's pretty cool. It's about giving and generosity. And so I've got this, they gave me this analysis sheet, and you guys didn't score really well, but I know you're doing good work. What's going on? Right? And so you might find that there's a reason behind that. I looked at an organization, again, that was helping kids as they aged out of the foster care system. And a lot of this, they were providing a pretty high number of services in terms of counseling and all that kind of stuff. And that, and part of that was state funded. So that changed their scoring, if you will, on the 990 score sheet. And that's okay. They're still doing great stuff, but sometimes it's important to have the context and to understand why that is. And so sometimes it may mean, it may mean that they're not spending their money well. That's okay. I mean, it's not our job to go make them all perfect. Again, find one where your time and effort and money, if you're giving, is going to be well spent. Any comments or questions on that? All right. Are there any other organizations? I'm going to ask one more time. We don't necessarily need to do the ones in the handout because it's pretty simple. But anybody else? Anybody want us to look one up right now while we're still thinking about it?
Can you look up My City Youth Center? Did you mute me?
Okay, say it again.
Can you look up My City Youth Center? You know what? I think that's their DBA. I think their actual name is Youth for Truth.
Youth for Truth?
Yeah.
So let's see.
Oh,
Hey, Youth for Truth International?
yeah, that's it.
All right. So the first thing that kind of stands out is the size might be, let's see, how big was it? Well, we'll go to that in just a second. So again, providing at-risk youth access to free of charge programs of interest, equipping them with life skills and challenging them to make a positive impact, right?
Yeah.
So let's see. Here's our 990. They have their 2021 in there, squared away. All right, so now, remember multimedia. Let's kind of go through it. So again, let's look at, first thing is program service revenue. So we're gonna look at line number 9. So 0 program service revenue for this year. Oh, let me write this one down. So again, from a math perspective, it's 0 divided by 857,000. That equals 0. So they would get a score of 3 points there. Tracking so far?
Yeah.
All right, so now let's go down to pages 7 and 8 and look for highly compensated individuals. Is this big enough? Can you guys see this? Should I make it bigger?
A little bit bigger.
So it looks like they have a related couple, I'm going to say. I don't know if that's husband and wife.
It is. So it's
Okay. But again, so in this case, so there's nobody over 170, so they're going to score max points there, right? And again, having looked at a couple of these, what I would say to you guys is like, okay, this is not a red flag to me. You know, if they were both making $169,000, that would be a red flag to me, right? Based on the amount of revenue in the organization. But you know, it looks to me like it's a husband and wife that are passionate, and they're not, you know, Rebecca has a pretty cool sounding job title, but she's certainly not being, you know, overly compensated for it, right? So again, from that standpoint, I think that's a good news story. So now we'll come down to page 9. And we're going to look at 1E, which is 0. So they're not getting any grant money right now, divided by 855,000. So again, that's 0 divided by 855 equals 0. So 3 points there. See, it really does, once you start kind of doing this, it really starts to make sense, because we're going from, you know, kind of one block to another. All right, so let's go down now and look at page 10. Function, is that 10? Bear with me, sorry, I lost where I was. 9.
Excuse me, can you make it bigger?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
All right, so now we're going to look at 1B, which again, how are they giving away a lot of money, right? Are they effectively a pass through? And again, here the number is 0, and then we're going to divide that by 25 B, and so that divided by 185. So again, it's 0. So it's less than 0.6, so that gives us 3 points there. And then again, now we're going to look at line C and line A. So here's where they might, you know, where they're not going to score as well. So total functional expenses is about $199,000, right? C. And divide by column A, 385. So we'll do the percentage on that. So 199,000 divided by 385,000, that's about 51%. So that's a high number. And so they're only going to score 1 point there. And then on the last column, it's D, so it's 0 divided by A, 385. So again, they're going to score really well there. They'll get the full 3 points because it's less than 10%. So their total is 16 out of 18. So all in all, that's pretty good. Again, the functional expenses or, you know, overhead management is pretty high. It's actually really high. So, you know, again, that might be a question for them. But everything else looks really, really good on it. Did you guys track with that? Did it kind of make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, so next week we'll definitely do some more of those, okay? So, again, work on finding an organization that meets your passion. Be ready to kind of talk about that. Why are you passionate about it? Have you ever volunteered with it before? Because that's going to lead right into the next part of our discussion tonight, which is, kind of going back through the organizational review. Before we dig into this, anything else that we need to go back and kind of cover off on again?
Bill,
All right.
hey, Bill, one thing I'd say is I'd like to encourage you students to print out a couple of those blank 990 forms. And then in class next week, it's a little easier to use them kind of as a scratch sheet for a couple different ones.
Definitely. Thanks, Dan.
And this is the part where everybody really procrastinates, let's just say. So, jump in to start and look for something, even if it's just for practice.
Yeah, I mean, Dan makes a great point there. Not only is it easy to procrastinate because who wants to look up tax forms, right? But the reality is this class goes pretty fast, right? And so, before you know it, we're going to be at week 5, week 6, and it's going to be time to get your organizational review in. And again, it's a lot easier if you've got some things kind of identified early on in the process. Again, this is not supposed to be like, a master's thesis or anything like that, right? This is really just for you to be able to explain to the GU board what you've learned and why you're passionate about an organization, and then show how they score, on the 990 score sheet. So very simply stated, and I can show you a copy of, the Word doc that is part of this organizational review, but you just have to describe the organization. What does it do? What are its major activities? Is the organization having an impact? And so, sometimes that might not actually be in the 990. It might not be on your website. That may be something that you've got to ask about. So a couple of sessions ago, we did actually with the whole group of people up in Denver. And one of the organizations they identified, they fed 26,000 kids over the summer. It's like, oh, wow. Well, that's pretty impactful, right? And so what does having an impact mean to them? And then, can you quantify it, right? Because then I guess quantify it because we're all, business people or whatever, we're in the real world. We want to know, is it really making sense? And so again, some organizations will be pretty sophisticated. They're like, well, look, we fed 26,000 kids with this quality of food, and it was $3 per meal or something like that. We felt like that was a big impact. So again, think about how it's having an impact and describe it for it. You're going to want to review the 990, obviously, and discuss what you found. They're really good here. Looks like they're struggling a little bit on this part of it. And then lastly, this is kind of back to the passion piece. Have you been involved in the organization in the past? And how would you like to be involved with it in the future? So clearly in the last year, this has been really, really hard, right? Especially if you think about an after-school program. Well, and kids haven't been in school last year because of COVID. And so it may be difficult to kind of talk about how you would want to be or how you've been involved with it in the last year, or how you'd want to be involved in it if they're an organization that has been severely impacted by COVID. And so just kind of lay that out. Here's what I know. We had one woman, I think last class, who, she wanted to go over and volunteer, but they weren't letting anybody in. And that's okay. We have to deal with where we are today, right? So again, this isn't something that needs to be 27 pages long or anything like that. It's several paragraphs. It's the 990 and the score sheet, and you're 90% of the way there. The GU board's going to look at every single one of these, and they do. They look at them and they talk about them, and it's a yes or no vote. It's pretty simple. So sometimes people will say, should we be judging, right? Do we have a right to say, is one organization better than another? Hey, look, the reality is we do believe that some organizations can have better impact than others. It's not a value statement. It's not a value judgment. What we're trying to do here is get you guys thinking about nonprofits, where you should spend your time, attention, talents, provide funding if that's something you feel called to do. And when you do that, you know, this gives you an ability to understand how you can have the biggest impact. So, you know, sometimes I'll say is, look, if I give, again, $100 to an organization, I want to have $100 worth of impact. I think Steve Bray, the GU board, would say, if we give $100, can we have $500 of impact? How do we do that? And so, you know, be thinking about that. Some have more impact than others. And again, this is one way of evaluating, just to get you guys thinking about it. It's certainly not the be all end all. You know, the GU board members are going to apply the rules that we discussed. You know, what size is it? Is it local? Is it having an impact? What's the score on the 990 score sheet? And each person gets a vote. And, you know, for example, in a lot of cases, you know, Power Plus, a lot of the people in the GU board are related to or part of Power Plus, like Dan, right? And so, you know, there's vast knowledge of nonprofits, for example, in Southern California. So you might get a board member that says, hey, look, I know they don't score well, but I know this one, it's really good. I'm voting yes. And that's great. Simple majority wins. And sometimes if it's an organization that you're really passionate about, and you know, maybe the score sheet is a little bit marginal, you may get asked to do some additional research, and that's fine. That's great too. And then Dan mentioned earlier, you know, sometimes as a part of the course requirement, we're going to ask you to pick an organization that can pass the scrutiny of the score sheet. But for whatever reason, you may decide that, so you've got to do that, but you may decide you want to provide your $1,000 check to someone else, and you would kind of do another project, if you will, right? You write that one up and say, look, this is really where I want to spend. This is really where I would like you to send the money, and here's why. I volunteered with this organization for 10 years, whatever the case might be. So, any questions? All right, let's see. A couple other things. We want you to, again, local, choose an organization that is impacting, you know, your local community. And I will tell you, there's nothing like showing up to a meeting after having done all the research and handing somebody a check for $1,000. It's pretty cool. And so, you know, we want to try and avoid national organizations that happen to have a local presence. It's harder to understand really what they're doing in the local community. These are all great organizations doing great things, but try and make it truly a local organization. Help the GU board learn more about organizations. There's more than one instance where the been turned on organization through a student, and the board has provided additional level of funding for the organization as they learn about it. So kind of keep that in mind. I mean, you know, we keep saying this, and I feel like we say it, we emphasize it quite a bit, because it's really hard to believe how the board operates. They really want, first of all, they want all you guys to be successful with this, but they really want to fund organizations that are having an impact. So help the GU board learn about more organizations. And then again, keep size in mind. You know, they have to be big enough to do the full 990. Try not to pick a mega organization. You know, I think again, 20 million is a good kind of guideline for top line number. It doesn't, you know, it could be 30 million, it could be 15, but you know, keep the size in mind as well. All right, so more homework. Sorry. If you haven't decided, or you haven't found your passion, as Dan mentioned, look, start digging in, start thinking about this. Where do you want to make an impact? Where do you want to spend your time? And then start doing a little bit of research. You know, next week, I'd like everybody be ready to at least propose an organization they at least want to take a look at. It doesn't have to be the final one. And you don't have to have the 990 analysis done, but we want you to again, I can't emphasize enough how quickly this class will go. And, we want you guys to, really have the time to do the research and not be at week 6 saying, everything I thought I was going to do doesn't work for one reason or another, or they're not scoring well, or they were just indicted, whatever the case might be, right? By the way, it is okay to pair up on if you want to work with someone, here in the class or whatever. What I will say is that you could pair up. You pick XYZ organization. You can pair up, and you could both designate the funds to that one organization. But we are going to ask you for 2 separate research projects. So we want, if Blanca and Adrian wanted to do it together, that's fine, but we still want to see 2 research projects. You guys probably have my email address already, but that's my Giving University email. I think you've probably also seen my work email. I use both of them. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'll try. I think also you should probably have my phone number if you need it on the email as well, if you have any specific questions. Beth Cora, who was on at the beginning, is really instrumental in helping us pull all this together. So as this stuff gets pulled together, Beth she actually works at Power Plus's corporate headquarters, and she'll pull it all together in kind of the package for each one of the board members when it goes to the board meeting for review. So when you're sending stuff in, send it to me and to her. And again, if you have any questions and you can't get to me, she's also a wealth of knowledge. She basically administers all the trips, helps us with all of this stuff, kind of making everything happen for GU. There's the form again. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question. So would I be able to pick my the place where I work as an organization? Or does it have to be somewhere new that I need to discover?
Dan, you there?
Yes, we always like you to discover
Something new, I think. But you could probably designate the funds to go to yours.
possibly,
Okay.
or we can do a split, something like that.
Yeah.
So we'll do 2 if you have 2 really like you. We do 2 at 500. But normally if you work somewhere, we ask you to pick somewhere else, or just we want to expand your world.
Mm,
But you can always give it a shot. Just can't promise it.
Other questions?
Yeah, Bill, can you say again where can I find the 9/11 analysis? Yeah.
Say again?
Where can I find the 990 analysis?
Yeah, so this is, it should be, I'll send a copy of it in my follow-up, but it should be in your GU handout. That I think I sent a copy of that last week.
Oh, logic. Thanks.
Time to take a note. I always say I'm going to send all this stuff, and then if I forget something and somebody's like, hey, you said you were going to send this. Let me just, I'll let's see. See if I can just pull this up just so you see what the organization review looks like. And again, I'll send a copy of this. So separate, I'm going to send you guys the GU analysis slide, this organizational review document, and then the slides from tonight. And again, in the slides are where you'll find the login for GuideStar. But so you see this thing is it's not huge. It's a couple of pages. And again, it kind of walks you through all of the other stuff. You need to send in a copy of the 990 with it and the evaluation form. So it's pretty simple. All right. So I promise you that not every night will we finish on time. So we'll take this as a small win tonight. Anybody else have any other questions? There's something in the chat. Let me look at this. I told you guys I'm terrible on the chat.
Bill, this is Katie. I just sent my
Yeah.
email because I was not getting emails from you, but I was getting emails from Beth. So
Okay,
I just
yeah.
made sure there's my email address just to make sure I'm on your list.
Perfect. We should, I know, I think Dan was updating the list because we had a couple of ads, yourself and maybe Gina, but I'll make sure that we have this on we have a list for the group. All right. Well, listen, week 2 in the books. Thank you all for your time and attention. I know some of this stuff is a little bit dry. It's but again, we will, like I said, next week we'll go through a couple of more of these. So you know they really become almost easy to do and get through the analysis pretty quickly. But if you have any questions or something doesn't seem to make sense, please reach out to myself or Beth or even Dan, because I think he's on some of the emails as well. And we'll get ready for next week. I should tell you what we're doing next week, shouldn't I? I can't remember what I did yesterday, so. Next week, we're going to talk about objections to generosity and the concept of entitlement. So there you go. All right. If there are no other questions, I'll let you guys go. Thanks again so much. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
See ya.
Thank you. Thanks.
See you guys.
Bye.